My parents ignored my graduation, so I celebrated with celebrities at my penthouse in Pacific Heights, which they didn't even know I owned, because they never asked about my life after I dropped out of Stanford's pre-med program to pursue tech. While my mom posted 47 photos of my brother Ethan's high school baseball game that same day, I was popping Dom Perignon with 3 A-list actors who invested in my AI-powered wellness app that just sold for $40 million. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stood on my terrace overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, watching the sunset paint the sky orange while my phone buzzed with their absent silence. No text, no call, nothing acknowledging I'd just earned my master's degree in computer science with highest honors from Berkeley. The celebration wasn't planned vindictively. When the acquisition deal closed that morning, the same morning as my graduation ceremony, my investor friends insisted on celebrating immediately. Marcus Chen, lead actor in that superhero franchise everyone's obsessed with, brought the champagne. His wife Sophia, the Oscar-nominated director, arranged for a private chef. And somehow Ryan Torres, that musician who just swept the Grammys, showed up with his guitar and played acoustic versions of his hits on my living room floor. They'd all believed in Vital Mind when it was just sketches on napkins 18 months ago. They'd written checks when venture capitalists laughed at a 26-year-old dropout. And now, on the day I proved I could finish what I started academically while building something revolutionary, they were the ones toasting me. Not the people who raised me. I'm Jordan Sterling, 28 years old, and I've spent the last 6 years being invisible to my parents. When I walked away from their dream of Dr. Sterling, MD, they walked away from me. My father, Dr. Robert Sterling, chief of cardiology at UCSF Medical Center, stopped taking my calls. My mother, Patricia Sterling, professor of molecular biology, removed my photos from the family gallery wall. My younger brother Ethan became their entire world. The backup plan, the child who would fulfill their legacy. What they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask about, was that their failure became my fuel. Every ignored birthday, every holiday invitation extended to Ethan but not me, every family photo caption reading "Our pride and joy" with only him in the frame, all of it crystallized into pure ambition. I'd built something they couldn't understand, earned wealth they couldn't fathom, and surrounded myself with people who saw my value when my own blood couldn't. The envelope sitting on my counter held more than just my diploma. It contained evidence of every achievement they'd missed, every milestone they'd dismissed, and proof that their rejection had been the best thing that ever happened to me. Sophia raised her glass, her emerald eyes sparkling with genuine warmth. To Jordan, who proved everyone wrong by being spectacularly right. The toast echoed across my 3,000-square-foot penthouse, bouncing off walls they'd never seen, celebrating success they'd never acknowledged. My phone buzzed again, but not from my parents. It was my attorney, confirming the wire transfer. $40 million, minus the investor shares that made everyone in this room significantly wealthier. I glanced at the framed photo on my bookshelf, the only one I'd kept from my old life. Me at 12, standing between my parents at Ethan's birth, their hands on his bassinet, their eyes full of hope for their second chance. I wasn't in that hope. I was just the hand holding the baby blanket. "You're doing that thing again," Marcus said, following my gaze. "That look you get when you're plotting world domination or revenge. Which is it this time?" I smiled, the kind of smile that had unnerved more than one VC in pitch meetings. Why not both? The laughter that followed filled spaces my parents' voices never had. But underneath the celebration, underneath the champagne bubbles and the guitar melodies, something harder crystallized in my chest. Tomorrow, I'd send them something. Not an invitation to reconcile. They'd lost that privilege years ago. Something better. Something that would show them exactly what they'd thrown away when they decided their vision of my life mattered more than my actual life. The city lights began twinkling below, each one a possibility, each one a reminder that I'd built this empire from nothing while they built monuments to Ethan's mediocrity. Ryan's acoustic version of his hit "Disappeared" floated through the penthouse, the lyrics about being invisible striking differently tonight. "You erased me from your story, wrote me out of every page, so I wrote my own damn glory, built a kingdom from your rage." He'd written it about his own family rejection, which was why we'd connected immediately when we met at a tech conference last year. We were the same, children who'd been discarded for not fitting the mold, who'd turned that rejection into fuel. "This one's for everyone who was told they weren't enough," he said, looking directly at me. The words settled into my bones, joining all the other words that had shaped me. Worthless when I changed majors, disappointment when I dropped out, mistake when I started my company, nobody when I stopped showing up to family events I was never invited to anyway. My phone finally went silent. Midnight had passed. My graduation day was officially over, celebrated by everyone except the two people whose approval I'd once craved so desperately I'd nearly destroyed myself trying to earn it. The champagne had gone warm in my glass, but I didn't care. Tomorrow would bring something new. Tomorrow, I'd make sure they understood the magnitude of their mistake. Not through begging for their attention or desperately seeking their approval. Those days had died the moment they chose Ethan over me. No. Tomorrow I'd send them evidence they couldn't ignore, proof they couldn't dismiss, and a truth that would haunt them far longer than their silence had haunted me. Because I wasn't their invisible daughter anymore. I was Jordan Sterling, tech entrepreneur, master's graduate, and the woman who'd learned the most valuable lesson they'd accidentally taught me. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming someone they'll wish they'd known. The morning after my graduation, I woke to 17 missed calls from my college advisor, Dr. Helena Novak, and a text that made my coffee taste sweeter. "Jordan, the Chancellor wants to feature you in the commencement program retrospective. Your story is exactly what we need to show donors." I deleted it. Berkeley hadn't believed in me either when I'd first transferred in as a Stanford dropout with a controversial app idea. They'd accepted me conditionally, skeptically, with advisors suggesting I consider more realistic career paths, even as I was coding Vital Mind in the computer lab at 3 a.m. Now they wanted to parade me around like a prize pony. The irony was delicious. My penthouse felt different in daylight. Larger, emptier, more honest about what it represented. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the San Francisco Bay like a living painting, each element carefully curated. The Eames lounge chair where Marcus had passed out last night, still holding his champagne flute. The Steinway grand piano Ryan had played until dawn, the original Banksy on my wall worth more than my parents' entire home. Every object was a trophy, every surface a testament to the life I'd built while they pretended I didn't exist. But trophies don't fill the hollow spaces carved by maternal absence. Success doesn't warm the cold spots where a father's pride should live. I'd learned to live with these contradictions, the woman who had everything except the one thing she'd actually wanted. My phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. "Breakfast at Tartine? Need to discuss the documentary rights." I'd forgotten about that. 3 production companies wanted to turn Vital Mind's creation story into content, complete with the dropout angle and the family rejection arc. Sophia thought it could be powerful. I thought it could be weaponized. The difference between us was that she still talked to her parents. She couldn't understand that some families don't deserve redemption narratives. Some families deserve to watch from the outside while you become everything they said you'd never be. I pulled up Instagram, something I rarely did anymore, but morbid curiosity won. My mother's account was public, a carefully curated gallery of academic excellence and maternal pride. All of it focused on Ethan. His latest post showed him in his Stanford baseball uniform, caption reading, "So proud of my son, following in his father's footsteps at our alma mater." The comments were predictable. "Congratulations, what a handsome young man, you must be so proud." I scrolled further. Not a single mention of me in 2 years. Not one reference to Jordan. I'd been digitally erased as thoroughly as if I'd never existed. The algorithmic evidence of parental love had a gaping daughter-shaped hole in it. What they didn't know, what I'd carefully hidden, was that I'd been following Ethan's life more closely than they'd followed mine. Not out of sibling rivalry, but strategic intelligence gathering. I knew about his struggling GPA, barely maintaining the minimum for athletic eligibility. I knew about the academic probation he'd narrowly avoided last semester. I knew about the tutor my parents were paying $3,000 a month to keep him in school. And I knew something else, something I'd discovered accidentally while running a background check for my company's security protocols. Ethan had applied to Stanford using an essay I'd written 6 years ago for my own application, word for word. The same essay about overcoming adversity and pursuing dreams despite opposition. The irony was almost too perfect. He'd stolen my words to get into the school I'd voluntarily left, while my parents celebrated him as their golden child. I arrived at Tartine to find Sophia already deep in her third espresso, laptop open, documents scattered. "Jordan, you look like you're plotting murder. Should I be concerned?" She'd known me long enough to read the signs, the tight jaw, the calculated smile, the way my fingers drummed against my coffee cup in patterns that usually preceded major business moves. "Just thinking about family dynamics," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "How some people get everything handed to them while others have to build from nothing." She studied me with those director's eyes that had won her the Oscar nomination, the ability to see through performance to truth underneath. "This is about your parents, isn't it? About them missing yesterday." I told her everything. Not the sanitized version I'd shared during investor meetings, the compelling dropout story, the triumph over adversity, but the raw truth. How my mother had called me selfish for choosing computer science over medicine, said I was wasting my Stanford education on playing with computers. How my father had told me I'd never amount to anything without his guidance, that tech was for people who couldn't handle real academic rigor. How they'd hosted a family dinner to celebrate my dropping out. Not as support, but as an intervention, complete with extended family members and a Stanford dean they'd personally invited to convince me to return. How I'd sat at that table, 22 years old, and listened to 15 people tell me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. How not one person, not even Ethan, had defended me. "That's when I disappeared," I said, watching Sophia's expression shift from sympathy to understanding. "I stopped going home for holidays, stopped calling, stopped pretending I needed their approval to exist. They didn't notice for 3 months. When they finally did, my mother sent me an email, not a call, an email, saying I was welcome back when I came to my senses. I pulled out my phone, showed her the email I'd saved. "Jordan, we love you, but cannot support this self-destructive path. When you're ready to resume your medical studies and be part of this family again, our door is open." The date stamp read, December 15th, 2019. I'd never responded. I'd been too busy building Vital Mind's first prototype. Sophia's hand covered mine across the table, her rings cool against my skin. "Jordan, honey, you know this isn't healthy, right? Keeping all this inside?" But I wasn't keeping it inside anymore. Yesterday had changed something. Not just the graduation they'd ignored, but the realization that I'd been waiting for them to notice, to acknowledge, to apologize. 6 years of building wealth and influence. And somewhere deep down, I'd still been that 22-year-old at the dinner table, desperate for just one person to say I wasn't crazy. "I'm done waiting," I told her. "I'm done being invisible. And I'm done letting them pretend I don't exist while they parade Ethan around like their only child." "What are you going to do?" Sophia asked, but her tone suggested she already knew. That director's instinct for narrative climax. I pulled out the envelope I'd brought, the one containing my diploma, the acquisition announcement, and something else I'd prepared in the early morning hours. A letter. Not to my parents. They'd lost the privilege of my direct communication. A letter to Stanford's admissions office, meticulously documented with evidence of Ethan's plagiarized essay. "I'm going to stop protecting him," I said simply. Sophia's eyes widened. "Jordan, that could get him expelled." "That could get him expelled," I agreed, "just like they got me erased. Consequences have a beautiful symmetry, don't they?" But even as I said it, something twisted in my chest. Not guilt. I was past guilt. More like the recognition that this action would cross a line, would make me something I'd never been. Someone who actively destroys rather than simply succeeds despite. Sophia saw the hesitation. "You don't have to do this. Your success is already the best revenge. $40 million, Jordan. You won. They lost. Why isn't that enough?" Because it wasn't. Because somewhere in the hollow spaces I still needed them to hurt the way they'd hurt me, because I was tired of being the bigger person when they'd made me feel so small. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Ms. Sterling, this is Janet Reeves from Forbes. We're running a feature on breakthrough tech entrepreneurs under 30, and your name came up repeatedly. We'd love to interview you about Vital Minds acquisition and your journey from Stanford dropout to multimillionaire. I met Sophia's eyes across the table, saw her barely perceptible shake of the head, a warning against weaponizing press attention. I'd be happy to, I said instead, and watched Sophia close her eyes. In fact, I have quite a story about perseverance despite family opposition. When would you like to meet? After Forbes came TechCrunch. After TechCrunch came Bloomberg. By noon, I'd scheduled 4 major interviews, each one carefully calibrated to tell my story. The real story, with names and details and the kind of specificity that would make it very clear exactly who had called their daughter's dreams worthless. Sophia had stayed silent through the scheduling, just watching me with that director's gaze, probably already editing the documentary in her head. "You're burning bridges," she finally said, as I hung up from the last call. "I'm not burning them," I corrected. "I'm just stopped pretending they ever existed in the first place." We walked back to my building in silence, the San Francisco fog rolling in early, turning the city ghostly. My phone buzzed constantly. Congratulations, messages from people who'd seen the acquisition announcement, interview requests, investment opportunities, success breeding success, exactly as I'd planned. But underneath all of it, I couldn't shake the image of Ethan at that family dinner 6 years ago, sitting silent while everyone told me I was making a mistake. He'd been 16 then, still a kid. Did he deserve to pay for our parents' sins? Did he deserve to have his future destroyed because mine had been dismissed? "I have another idea," Sophia said as we reached my building. "What if instead of destroying Ethan, you invited them to something? Forced them to see what they missed?" I laughed, bitter and sharp. "Like what? A victory lap? Come see the daughter you erased, now featuring penthouse and bank account? That's pathetic." "No," Sophia said carefully, "like a charity gala, something public, prestigious, impossible to ignore, something that would make their absence more telling than their presence." The idea landed differently than I expected, not as weakness, but as strategy. Let them choose publicly, visibly, whether their daughter existed. Let them either show up and face what they'd lost, or stay away and prove to everyone who mattered that they'd never deserved me in the first place. "I'd need to make it big enough that they'd look petty for skipping," I said, mind already calculating. "Important enough that their academic circles would notice their absence." Sophia's smile was pure mischief. "Jordan, honey, I'm a Hollywood director with very generous friends. I can make it the event of the season." We stood in my lobby, surrounded by marble and brass and all the expensive signifiers of success, and I realized this was the moment, the fork in the road between destruction and demonstration. I could destroy Ethan and prove I was just as capable of cruelty as they'd been, or I could build something so undeniable that their absence would speak louder than any revenge I could orchestrate. 3 weeks, I said. "Can you make it happen in 3 weeks?" Sophia pulled out her phone, already texting. "Please, I once organized a wedding for 200 people in 4 days. 3 weeks is a lifetime." As she typed, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Stanford Alumni Magazine asking if I'd be their cover story for the fall issue about unconventional paths to success. I forwarded it to Sophia without opening it. "Add this to the press list for the gala," I said. "Let's make sure everyone knows exactly what version of success they're celebrating." She looked at me with something between admiration and concern. "You're either going to change everything or burn it all down." "Why not both?" I replied, and this time, I meant it. The gala came together with terrifying efficiency. Sophia hadn't exaggerated her Hollywood connections. Within 48 hours, I had confirmed RSVPs from tech CEOs, venture capitalists, 3 senators, and enough celebrity firepower to make it a genuine cultural event. The cause was perfect, too. A new scholarship fund for first-generation college students pursuing non-traditional careers. Students whose families don't understand their dreams, as Sophia phrased it in the press release. The irony was so heavy, it threatened to sink the entire event. I rented out the Legion of Honor Museum because nothing said "you missed everything" quite like hosting a black tie gala in one of San Francisco's most prestigious venues. The invitations went out on heavy cream cardstock with gold embossing, hand-delivered by courier. "Jordan Sterling requests the honor of your presence at the inaugural Vital Mind Foundation Gala." I included my parents' names on the mailing list personally, adding their address from memory. The house I hadn't visited in 6 years. The home that had erased me from its walls. The invitation said nothing about family, made no mention of reconciliation. It was purely professional, coldly formal, and utterly unavoidable for anyone in the Bay Area's academic or professional circles. What I didn't anticipate was the media frenzy. Forbes ran their profile 3 days after I scheduled it, titled, "The Daughter They Dismissed, Jordan Sterling's $40 million Comeback." The piece was devastatingly specific. My parents' academic credentials, their pressure for medical school, their complete withdrawal of support when I chose differently. The journalist, a woman named Claire Ashford, who'd apparently experienced similar family rejection, had written it like a war story. Me versus the world, succeeding despite impossible odds. Within hours, it was trending on Twitter. Within days, it had spawned think pieces about parental pressure in academic families, about the tech industry's complicated relationship with traditional education, about women in STEM fighting both industry bias and family expectations. My mother called for the first time in 6 years. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again. By the 5th call, I listened to the message. "Jordan, this article is extremely hurtful and unfair. Your father and I have always supported you. Please call us back so we can discuss this privately." The gaslighting was impressive, revising history so completely she might have convinced herself. I saved the message but didn't respond. Let them experience the silence I'd lived with. Let them wonder if I'd answer, if I'd forgive, if I even cared anymore. The power had shifted, and it tasted like champagne. Ethan called next, his voice tight with panic. "Jordan, Mom and Dad are freaking out. That article made them look terrible. Can you please just talk to them?" I almost hung up, but something in his tone stopped me. Not anger, but fear. "Ethan, I didn't write the article. I just told the truth. If the truth makes them look terrible, that's on them." Silence on his end, the kind that stretches and reveals. "You're really not going to fix this, are you?" he finally asked. "Fix what?" I replied. "The fact that they pretended I didn't exist for 6 years? That they removed my photos from their house? That Mom posted 47 pictures of your baseball game on my graduation day and 0 of my actual graduation? What exactly am I supposed to fix?" "They're my parents too," he said quietly. "This is destroying them." And there it was, the manipulation, the guilt trip, the expectation that I'd protect them from consequences because family. "Then maybe they should have thought about that before they destroyed me," I said and hung up. My hands shook after, not from anger but from the realization that I'd just cut the last thread connecting me to the family I'd once desperately loved. Ethan was 22 now, old enough to have defended me back then, old enough to have called these past 6 years, old enough to have noticed I'd disappeared from family photos. His silence had been complicity. His comfort had been paid for by my erasure. The Bloomberg interview went live next, this one focusing on the business side. How I'd built VitalMind with no family support, how I'd bootstrapped from freelance coding work, how every investor who believed in me had become chosen family. The interviewer asked directly about my parents. "Do you hope they see your success now?" I'd looked at the camera and said, "I hope they see what they missed. Not just the success, the person. The 6 years of growth and struggle and triumph they chose not to witness. Success is just money. They missed watching me become myself." The clip went viral. Suddenly, I wasn't just a tech success story. I was a symbol of something larger, something thousands of people resonated with viscerally. Messages flooded my social media from strangers sharing their own family rejection stories. Parents who disowned them for being gay, for marrying outside their race, for choosing art over medicine, for refusing to follow predetermined paths. I'd accidentally tapped into something universal, the pain of being invisible to the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. My assistant, a brilliant organizer named Priya Novak, had to hire 2 temps just to sort through the messages. "Jordan, you've become a movement," she said, showing me the hashtag, invisible, no more trending worldwide. "This is bigger than revenge. This is representation." But revenge still tasted sweet. 2 weeks before the gala, I received the RSVP from my parents. Dr. Robert Sterling and Dr. Patricia Sterling regret they cannot attend due to prior commitments. The formal language couldn't disguise the panic. They were hiding. The people who'd demanded I return to their version of my life were too cowarded to face the life I'd actually built. I posted their RSVP on Instagram with a simple caption, "Some things never change." The internet did the rest, with hundreds of comments calling them out, sharing similar experiences, expressing support. My follower count jumped from 8,000 to 300,000 overnight. Ethan called again, angry this time. "Are you trying to destroy them completely? That Instagram post was cruel, Jordan." "Was it cruel when they posted 47 photos of you and 0 of me?" I countered. "Was it cruel when they removed my photos from their house? When they celebrated my dropping out like a family victory? When they didn't call on my birthday for 6 consecutive years?" "That's different," he started, but I cut him off. "It's not different, Ethan. It's exactly the same. I'm just better at it because I had to learn how to survive their cruelty. You never did. You were always safe." He hung up without responding. The day before the gala, Sophia called an emergency meeting at my penthouse. She arrived with Marcus, Ryan, and surprisingly Dr. Novak from Berkeley. "Jordan, we need to talk about what happens next," Sophia started, unusually serious. "You've built something powerful here, but it's reaching a critical point. Tomorrow night will either be a celebration of your triumph or a public execution of your parents. You need to decide which one you want." I looked at them, these people who'd become my chosen family, who'd invested in me when no one else would. "Why can't it be both?" I asked. Dr. Novak spoke up, her Russian accent thicker with emotion. "Because, Jordan, I've watched brilliant students destroy themselves with bitterness. Your parents were wrong, catastrophically wrong. But if tomorrow is only about hurting them, you'll wake up the day after with nothing but hollow victory." "What else is there?" I asked, genuinely confused. "They made their choice 6 years ago. They're still making it by not showing up tomorrow." "Then let their absence be the statement," Marcus said gently. "Fill that room with so much success, so much genuine connection, so many people who see your value, that their empty chairs speak louder than any words you could say." Ryan pulled out his guitar, started playing something soft. "I wrote this last week about watching you plan this gala. It's called The Space Where They Should Be." The lyrics cut through every defense I'd built. "Set a place at your table for the ghost of their love. Let the empty chair tell the story of what they weren't made of. Your success is the monument. Your joy is the proof that the family you're born to ain't always the truth." By the time he finished, I was crying. Not sad tears, but something closer to release. "I still want them to hurt," I admitted. "I still want them to regret every moment they dismissed me." "They will," Sophia said simply. "Not because you destroyed them, but because they'll see what they could have had and chose to refuse. That's a pain no revenge could match." She pulled out her laptop, showed me the final guest list, 400 confirmed attendees, including every major tech CEO in Silicon Valley, half of Hollywood's A-list, and enough academic prestige to make my parents' absence from their own daughter's triumph feel like professional suicide. "Let this be enough," she said. "Let your success be the revenge." The night before the gala, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my penthouse, looking at everything I'd built, the art, the view, the space itself, and realized it had all been built as an answer to my parents' rejection. Every purchase, every success, every calculated move had been about proving them wrong. What would I be without that driving force? Who was Jordan Sterling when she wasn't fighting to be seen? The question terrified me more than anything they'd ever said. Maybe Dr. Novak was right. Maybe I'd let bitterness become my identity so completely I'd forgotten how to be anything else. My phone buzzed at 3 a.m, Ethan sending a text instead of calling. "Mom and Dad are thinking about coming tomorrow. Dad says he doesn't want to be publicly humiliated, but also doesn't want to seem like he's hiding. I told them they should go, that you'd want them there." Was I wrong? I stared at the message for a long time, understanding finally crystallizing. They weren't afraid of me. They were afraid of how they'd look to other people. Even now, facing the daughter they'd discarded, their concern was reputation management. Not apology, not reconciliation, just damage control. I typed back, "Tell them the honest truth. I don't care if they come or not. Their presence or absence won't change anything. I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing this despite them. There's a difference. But even as I hit send, I wondered if that was true. Had I really built all this despite them, or because of them? Was my success authentic or just an elaborate response to their rejection? The questions swirled through the pre-dawn darkness of my penthouse, mixing with doubt I hadn't allowed myself to feel in 6 years. Tomorrow would be perfect. The event, the guests, the press coverage, the scholarship launch. Tomorrow would prove I'd made it, that I'd been right, that they'd been catastrophically wrong. So why did it feel like I was still that 22-year-old at the dinner table, desperately searching 15 faces for just one person who believed in me? The Legion of Honor was transformed into something between a tech conference and a Hollywood premiere, with red carpets, photographers, and enough security to make it clear this wasn't just another charity gala. I'd chosen a custom Armani gown, midnight blue that matched the bay at twilight, with architectural lines that said power without apology. My hair was pulled back severe and elegant, makeup perfect, every detail calculated to project the image of someone who'd become exactly what they'd always meant to be. I looked in the mirror of the museum's private room and barely recognized myself. The scared 22-year-old was gone. In her place stood someone harder, more polished, successful beyond measure, and utterly alone in a way that success couldn't fix. Sophia found me staring at my reflection 30 minutes before doors opened. "You look like you're preparing for war, not a gala. Isn't that what this is?" I asked. She adjusted my necklace, a diamond piece Marcus had insisted on lending me, worth more than most people's houses, and met my eyes in the mirror. "No, honey, this is your coronation. The war was the last 6 years. Tonight is just showing everyone you won." But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like standing at the edge of something irreversible, knowing that whatever happened in the next few hours would define not just my relationship with my parents, but who I'd become in their absence. The guests arrived like a who's who of American success. Governor Martinez of California, 3 Fortune 500 CEOs, enough tech billionaires to fund a small country, and the celebrity contingent that made it feel more Oscars than charity event. Ryan performed an acoustic set during cocktail hour. Marcus and Sophia held court with directors and producers, all of them wearing their Vital Mind investment like a badge of honor. The press coverage was immediate and relentless. Every major outlet had sent reporters, all of them aware this was bigger than a scholarship fund launch. This was a cultural moment about family, success, and what we owe the people who raised us. I watched the entrance obsessively, caught between dread and hope that my parents might actually show up. Each arriving couple made my heart jump. Was that them? Had they come? But as 8 o'clock passed, then 8:30, then 9, their absence became its own statement. The empty seats I'd reserved in the front row, Dr. Robert Sterling and Dr. Patricia Sterling, name cards elegant and accusing, drew more attention than any speech could have. Guests whispered. Cameras photographed the vacant chairs. The visual metaphor was so perfect it hurt. The space where parents should be, preserved and empty at their daughter's triumph. Dr. Novak gave the opening remarks, speaking about the scholarship fund's mission with genuine passion. "We're creating opportunities for students whose families can't or won't support their dreams. Students like Jordan Sterling, who had to choose between family approval and authentic self." The applause was thunderous, but all I could see were those empty chairs. Ethan hadn't come either. My entire biological family had chosen, collectively and publicly, to continue my erasure even when faced with irrefutable evidence of my success. The hurt was visceral, physical, like being that 22-year-old again, watching 15 people at a dinner table agree I was making a mistake. Then Sophia took the microphone for my introduction, and something in me shifted. Jordan Sterling is many things: entrepreneur, innovator, self-made millionaire. But tonight, I want to talk about what makes her extraordinary, not her success, but her survival. She built an empire from nothing because the people who should have helped her chose not to. She created a family from friendship because the family she was born into rejected her authentic self. And she's using her success not for revenge, but to ensure other young people don't have to choose between their dreams and their family's love. The room fell silent. the weight of her words settling over 400 successful people who understood, perhaps better than they wanted to admit, what family rejection cost. I walked to the stage feeling like I was walking to my own execution, not my celebration. The empty chairs seemed to follow me, their accusation clear. You did this. You pushed them away. You chose this loneliness. But then I looked at Sophia, at Marcus, at Ryan, at Dr. Novak, at Priya, at the hundreds of people who'd shown up not because they had to, but because they wanted to celebrate me. People who'd invested in me, believed in me, supported me when my own parents wouldn't return my calls. And I realized something that should have been obvious 6 years ago. Family isn't about biology. Family is about who shows up. 6 years ago, I began, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. I sat at a dinner table with 15 people who loved me, or so I thought. They were there for an intervention, to convince me that choosing computer science over medicine was a catastrophic mistake that would ruin my life. I paused, let the silence stretch. My mother told me I was being selfish. My father said I'd never amount to anything without his guidance. My extended family agreed unanimously that I was throwing away my future. Not one person at that table defended my choice. Not one person asked what I actually wanted. They decided who I should be, and when I refused to comply, they decided I shouldn't be at all. The room was absolutely silent now, the kind of attention that comes from shared experience. I disappeared from family photos. My name stopped appearing in their Christmas cards. My birthday came and went 6 times without a call. When I got engaged 2 years ago, yes, there was someone. Briefly, they weren't invited because they'd made it clear I wasn't family anymore. That last part was a lie, but it landed perfectly. Gasps rippled through the audience. Even Sophia looked surprised, her director's mind probably already editing the documentary to include this revelation. My point isn't to humiliate them, though I understand their absence tonight speaks for itself. My point is that their rejection taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, that I didn't need them. That success built despite opposition is sweeter than success handed down through family obligation. I gestured to the empty chairs. I reserved those seats hoping they'd come, hoping they'd see what they missed. But their absence is actually perfect, because it proves exactly what this scholarship is about. You don't need your family's approval to succeed. You need your own determination, your own vision, and the courage to build chosen family from people who actually see your value. The applause started slowly, then built to something overwhelming. People standing, some crying, the room recognizing truth in what I'd said. But I wasn't finished. I hadn't come this far to take the gracious path. That said, I continued, and the room quieted again, sensing the shift. I want to address something directly. I pulled out my phone, projected Ethan's Instagram onto the screens behind me, his latest post from that morning, showing him at Stanford practice with the caption, "Family first always. Blessed Ashter Stanford Ashjasker future CEO." The irony of the timing wasn't lost on the audience. This is my brother, Ethan Sterling, celebrating family values on the morning of his sister's biggest professional moment. He's at Stanford on my parents' dime, using my parents' connections, following the path they demanded I follow. And he's there. I paused for impact, using an essay he plagiarized from my own Stanford application 6 years ago. The room exploded. Cameras flashed. Reporters typed frantically. Sophia's face went pale, realizing I'd just crossed the line she'd begged me not to cross. I projected the evidence. My original essay from 2017, Ethan's application essay from 2023, word for word identical. I discovered this months ago while running background checks for my company. I kept quiet because I told myself I was the bigger person, that I'd risen above pettiness. But watching him post about family values while my parents sit at home rather than attend this event made me realize something. Protecting them from consequences isn't kindness. It's enabling. Ethan cheated his way into Stanford using my words, my story, my experience, and my parents probably helped him do it. That's not family. That's fraud. The gala had become something else entirely, not a celebration, but a reckoning. I watched in real time as reporters verified the evidence as Stanford's representatives in the audience made urgent phone calls, as the scandal I'd just unleashed began spreading through social media. My phone buzzed insanely. Texts from Ethan, calls from my mother, messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. I ignored all of it. The Vital Mind Foundation will provide full scholarships for first-generation students pursuing non-traditional careers, I continued, forcing the program back on track. Because everyone deserves the chance to succeed without having to choose between their dreams and their family's love. Because success shouldn't require surviving your own parents' rejection. I left the stage to thunderous applause, but also to Sophia's horrified expression. "Jordan, what did you just do?" she whispered as I passed. "What I should have done 6 years ago," I replied. "Stopped protecting people who never protected me." The rest of the gala passed in a blur. Speeches from scholarship recipients, more of Ryan's acoustic set, endless photographs and interviews. But all anyone wanted to talk about was Ethan's plagiarism and my parents' absence. I'd successfully turned my triumph into their devastation. I'd weaponized my success into their destruction, and standing in the center of it all, surrounded by chosen family and genuine celebration, I felt absolutely nothing. Not vindication, not satisfaction, not peace. Just the hollow recognition that revenge tastes like ashes when you're eating it alone. At midnight, after the last guest departed and the museum staff began cleaning up, I stood in the empty gallery staring at those 2 vacant chairs. Sophia approached quietly, Marcus and Ryan flanking her like some kind of intervention squad. "You need to see this," she said, handing me her phone. It was a text from an unknown number. "I hope you're proud of yourself. You just destroyed your brother's life to prove a point. Your father had a heart attack 2 hours ago. He's at UCSF Medical. Don't bother coming. You've done enough damage. Mom." The phone slipped from my hands, clattering on marble that had witnessed my greatest triumph and my most devastating victory. Everything I'd built, everything I'd planned, every word I'd carefully crafted, it had all been leading to this moment where I discovered that winning completely feels exactly like losing everything. I didn't go to the hospital, not because I didn't care, though that's what the tabloids would later claim, but because I physically couldn't. My legs stopped working somewhere between reading the text and Sophia catching me as I collapsed. They carried me to my penthouse, where I spent the next 6 hours in something between shock and grief, watching my phone explode with messages I couldn't bring myself to answer. The news spread like wildfire. Tech entrepreneur's father hospitalized after daughter's exposé, and family feud turns fatal at San Francisco gala. Fatal. The word kept appearing, even though my mother's text hadn't said fatal, just heart attack. But the narrative had already been written. I'd destroyed my family for revenge, and now my father might die as a result. Ryan stayed with me while Sophia and Marcus dealt with press management. He sat on my couch playing quiet guitar, not speaking, just filling the silence with something other than my racing thoughts. Around dawn, Dr. Novak arrived with news. "Your father is stable. It was a moderate heart attack, likely brewing for months. The doctors say stress may have been a trigger, but the underlying condition was already there." She sat beside me, took my hand in hers with surprising gentleness. "Jordan, listen carefully. What you did last night was not what caused this. Your father's cardiovascular disease caused this. But you need to decide now. Are you going to let guilt rewrite history, or are you going to stand in the truth of what actually happened?" The truth. What even was the truth anymore? That I'd been wronged and sought revenge? That I'd weaponized success into destruction? That 6 years of hurt had culminated in one night where I'd burned every bridge while standing on a pile of my own achievements? "I don't know what I am anymore," I admitted. "I built everything to prove them wrong, and now that I have, I don't know who I'm supposed to be." Dr. Novak's smile was sad but knowing. "You're supposed to be Jordan Sterling, the woman who survived rejection and built something meaningful. The rest is just noise." My mother called around noon. I stared at her name on my screen for 6 rings before answering. "Mom." The word felt foreign, like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. "How is he?" Silence on her end, the kind loaded with years of unsaid things. "He's stable. They're keeping him for observation. Jordan, we need to talk about last night. Not, how are you, not, I'm sorry this happened, just logistics, damage control, the same pattern that had defined our relationship since I deviated from their script. What is there to talk about? I asked. I told the truth. Ethan plagiarized my essay. You didn't come to my gala. Dad had a heart attack that had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with you, she snapped, her professional composure cracking. You publicly humiliated us, destroyed your brother's future, and turned your success story into our failure. All because we didn't support your departure from the path we'd planned for you. There it was. Even now, even after everything, she couldn't admit they'd been wrong. It was still my departure from the path, as if I'd wandered off some predestined route rather than chosen my own life. Mom, I need you to hear something, probably for the first time. I don't care anymore. I don't care if you approve of my choices. I don't care if you're proud of me. I don't care if you understand why I chose computer science over medicine. I built a life without you, and it's a good life, and I don't need you to validate it. Then why the gala? She challenged. Why the public spectacle? If you truly don't care, why go through all that trouble to make us look bad? It was a fair question, one I'd been avoiding since the moment I'd planned the event. Because I wanted you to see what you missed, I admitted. I wanted you to understand that the daughter you dismissed became someone extraordinary, not despite your rejection, but because it forced me to stop seeking approval from people who couldn't give it. The gala wasn't about revenge, Mom. It was about visibility. You made me invisible, and I made myself impossible to ignore. Another silence, longer this time, waited with recognition. You were never invisible to us, Jordan. We didn't know how to support something we didn't understand. You didn't try, I said flatly. You didn't ask questions. You didn't respect my autonomy. You decided I was wrong and cut me out entirely when I wouldn't comply. That's not misunderstanding. That's conditional love. And I don't want it anymore. I could hear her crying now. Quiet tears she probably thought I couldn't detect. What do you want then? What would make this right? It was the question I'd been waiting 6 years to hear, and now that she'd asked it, I realized I didn't have an answer. What could make it right? Time didn't reverse. The missed birthdays, the removed photos, the years of silence, none of that could be undone. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe nothing makes it right. Maybe we just exist separately. You have Ethan. I have the life I built. That's enough. Jordan, he's your brother. Her voice broke completely. And you just destroyed his education, his future, everything he's worked for. Stanford expelled him this morning. The plagiarism investigation took 6 hours. He's devastated. He's talking about. He's not in a good place. The guilt hit like a physical blow, not because I regretted exposing the truth, but because I'd known this would happen and had done it anyway. I'd used Ethan as collateral damage in my war with our parents, and now he was paying a price he'd helped create but maybe didn't fully deserve. He plagiarized my work, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. That's on him, not me. You kept it secret for months, my mother countered. You could have reported it quietly, given him a chance to withdraw. Instead, you used it as a weapon at your public triumph. That's not justice, Jordan. That's cruelty. Was she right? Had I become the thing I'd accused them of being? Someone who prioritized their own vindication over family? I thought about Ethan at 16, sitting silent at that intervention dinner. I thought about him at 22, posting about family values on my graduation day while our parents ignored me. I thought about him using my words, my story, my pain to gain access to opportunities while I'd been shut out of family memories. He had 6 years to defend me, I said quietly. 6 years to call, to reach out, to acknowledge I existed. He chose your side, Mom. He chose the side that erased me. So yeah, I used him as an example, because he represented everything wrong with how you all treated me. The assumption that I deserved to disappear, that my story could be stolen, that my existence only mattered if it served your narrative. He's 22, she whispered. He was a child when this started. I was 22 when you cut me out, I reminded her. Old enough to be accountable, apparently. The conversation ended without resolution, both of us exhausted by years of accumulated hurt. I hung up and stared at my penthouse, the art, the view, the expensive evidence of success, and realized I'd built a beautiful cage. Everything here was acquired as proof. Proof I'd succeeded, proof they'd been wrong, proof I didn't need them. But a life built entirely as rebuttal to rejection isn't really a life. It's a monument to what you're running from. Sophia returned that evening with takeout and determination. We need to talk about what happens now. The press is insatiable. Everyone wants to know if you feel guilty, if you'll reconcile, if you regret the exposé. What do I regret? I asked, genuinely curious what she thought. I regret needing their approval for so long that its absence defined me. I regret letting 6 years of hurt turn me into someone who'd destroy my brother publicly. I regret that my father's heart attack will always be tied to my moment of triumph in everyone's memory. But do I regret exposing the truth? No. They've rewritten history for 6 years. Somebody needed to tell the actual story. And Ethan? Sophia pressed. He lost everything last night, Jordan. His education, his future prospects, his reputation. He's trending on Twitter as the plagiarist little brother of a tech success story. That's a stain that won't wash out. I thought about that for a long time. Ethan had been complicit, but not malicious. He'd benefited from my erasure, but hadn't orchestrated it. He'd plagiarized my essay, yes, but our parents had probably encouraged it, had definitely covered for him, had certainly never taught him that stealing his sister's story was wrong. He was a product of their values, raised in my absence to believe he was the only child that mattered. What do you think I should do? I asked Sophia. She pulled out her laptop, showed me something I hadn't seen. Ethan's Instagram from that morning, posted before the Stanford expulsion went public. It was a photo of him outside their parents' house, sitting on the front steps with his head in his hands. The caption read, "I'm sorry, Jordan, for everything, for staying silent, for using your words, for not being brave enough to defend you. You were right about all of it, and I've been a coward. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I finally understand what I helped them do to you." The post had been deleted within an hour, probably by my mother, trying to control the narrative, but Sophia had screenshot it before it disappeared. Something inside me cracked reading those words. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition that maybe Ethan hadn't been a villain. He'd been a teenager indoctrinated into their worldview, then a young adult too comfortable in the role of golden child to question it. He'd participated in my erasure, yes, but he'd also been shaped by it, taught that conditional love based on compliance was normal, that siblings were either allies or obstacles depending on how well they conformed. I need to talk to him, I said, alone, without Mom and Dad managing the conversation. Sophia nodded. I'll arrange it. But Jordan, whatever happens with your family, you need to figure out who you are separate from them. Success built as revenge is hollow. You're only 28. You have 60 years ahead. Don't spend them fighting a war that already ended. Ethan agreed to meet me at a coffee shop in Berkeley, neutral territory away from San Francisco and our parents. He looked terrible, unshaved, exhausted, wearing a Stanford sweatshirt he probably didn't realize the irony of. We sat across from each other in silence for a long minute, neither knowing how to start a conversation we should have had 6 years ago. I read your post before Mom deleted it, I finally said. Did you mean it? He nodded, not meeting my eyes. Every word. I've been thinking a lot about that dinner when you were 22. I was 16. I knew what was happening was wrong, but I was too scared to speak up. And then after you left, they made it so easy to just forget you existed. They removed your photos, stopped talking about you. It became normal for you to be gone. You could have called, I said, but without venom. You had my number. I know, I'm not making excuses. I was comfortable being the only child, the one who got all the attention and support. I convinced myself you were fine, that you'd chosen distance, that it wasn't my responsibility to fix their mistakes. I was selfish. He looked up, finally, and I saw genuine remorse in his eyes, not just because he'd been caught, but because he'd participated in something cruel. The essay thing. I found it on your old computer that Mom never cleared. She suggested I read it for inspiration. I don't think she realized it was word for word your essay. By the time I understood, I'd already submitted it, and I was too chicken shit to confess. You let me take the fall publicly, I pointed out. You could have come forward before I exposed it. I know. I thought maybe you wouldn't, that you'd be the bigger person because you always were. That was shitty thinking. He took a breath. Look, I know you don't owe me anything. My future is probably destroyed. Stanford won't take me back, and no other school will touch me with this plagiarism scandal. I get that. I'm sorry. For all of it. For not being the brother you deserved. The apology settled between us. Imperfect, but honest. I thought about what Dr. Novak had said, that I needed to decide who I was separate from the hurt. Ethan had wronged me, but he was also the kid who'd taught me to ride a bike before our parents' pressure divided us. He was the teenager who'd been indoctrinated into their conditional love. He was the young adult who'd finally woken up to what he'd participated in. I don't forgive you, I said honestly. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I understand you were raised in a toxic system I managed to escape. You didn't have that chance. What do I do now? He asked, his voice small. I don't know how to move forward from this. I pulled out an envelope I'd brought. Information about community colleges with excellent transfer programs, about gap year opportunities in tech that didn't require a Stanford degree, about the Vital Mind Foundation scholarship that was specifically designed for people whose traditional paths had been disrupted. You figure out who Ethan Sterling is when he's not mom and dad's golden child. You build something authentic instead of borrowed. And you learn that approval from people who give it conditionally isn't worth having. He took the envelope with shaking hands. Why are you helping me after what I did? Because, I said, someone should have helped me when I needed it. And because you're 22 making mistakes in a system designed to destroy authenticity. I was there once. I know how hard it is to break free. We talked for another hour, about our childhood before the pressure divided us, about the family we might have been if our parents had valued us as people instead of extensions of their legacy, about the possibility of a sibling relationship that wasn't built on competition or erasure. It wasn't reconciliation. Wounds this deep don't heal in a single conversation. But it was a start. As we left the coffee shop, Ethan paused. Jordan? That gala looked incredible. I saw the photos online. You really did build something amazing. You could too, I said. Just make sure you're building it for you, not as proof to them. That night, I finally read through all the messages that had accumulated since the gala. Most were supportive. Strangers sharing their own family rejection stories, colleagues offering congratulations, investors interested in Vital Mind's expansion. But one stood out. From my father, sent from his hospital room. Jordan, I'm sorry. Not just for the heart attack drama, though that timing was unfortunate. I'm sorry for making you feel like you had to choose between medicine and my love. I'm sorry for the intervention dinner. I'm sorry for 6 years of silence when I should have been calling to ask how you were doing. You were right to call us out. Your mother and I built our identities around academic legacy so completely that we forgot to see our children as people. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I finally understand what we did wrong. I read it 3 times, looking for the manipulation, the excuse, the way he might twist this into being my fault. But it seemed genuine. No request for reconciliation, no demands for privacy, just acknowledgement of harm done. It wasn't enough. It didn't erase 6 years or undo the damage, but it was something. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I called Dr. Novak. How do you know when you've stopped running from hurt and started running toward something real? She laughed softly. When you can think about your parents without rage or need for their approval. When you can build something for its own sake, not as proof you were right. When you can help someone like Ethan without it being about your own vindication. You're getting there, Jordan, but you're not there yet. She was right. I still checked my phone obsessively for reactions to the gala scandal. I still measured my success against their dismissal. I still defined myself by what they'd failed to see in me. But maybe, finally, I was ready to become someone who existed for her own sake rather than in opposition to their rejection. The Vital Mind Foundation would continue funding students who needed support their families wouldn't provide. My company would keep growing, creating wellness technology that actually helped people. And I would figure out, slowly and painfully, how to be Jordan Sterling. Not the rejected daughter, not the revenge success story, just myself. 3 months after the gala, I stood in my penthouse watching the sun set over the bay, and for the first time in 6 years, I wasn't thinking about my parents. I was thinking about Marisol, the first Vital Mind Foundation scholarship recipient, who'd just gotten accepted to MIT's computer science program despite her family's initial resistance. She'd called me crying, not sad tears, but joy tears, the kind that come from finally being seen. "You changed my life," she'd said, not just with the money, but by showing me I didn't have to choose between my dreams and my family's love, that I could build chosen family if I needed to. Ethan had enrolled in community college and was working part-time at a tech startup I'd quietly recommended him to. Not nepotism, but a chance earned by the humility he'd finally learned. We texted occasionally, carefully rebuilding something that might eventually resemble a sibling relationship. He was dating someone who knew nothing about our family drama, just knew him as Ethan, the guy trying to figure out coding. He seemed lighter, without the weight of being the golden child. My parents and I maintained careful distance. They'd sent a formal apology after my father's recovery, written, notarized, lawyer-approved, acknowledging specific harms rather than vague regrets. I'd accepted it without forgiving, a distinction that confused them but seemed to satisfy us both. We weren't family in any meaningful sense, but we weren't enemies either. We were just people who'd hurt each other and were now existing in parallel lives. The real surprise was discovering who I'd become without their rejection as my defining feature. Vital Mind expanded to mental health resources for first-generation college students, therapy, coaching, community support. I'd started speaking at colleges about navigating family pressure, about the difference between guilt and obligation, about building authentic lives when your family can't understand your choices. The speaking terrified me more than any business pitch, but it mattered in ways profit never had. Sophia finished her documentary, not about my revenge, but about chosen family in American culture. My story was one of 5, contextualized rather than sensationalized, honest about both the pain of rejection and the cost of public retaliation. It premiered at Sundance and started conversations about conditional love, academic pressure, and what we owe the people who raise us imperfectly. Ryan released an album called Invisible No More, dedicated to everyone who'd been erased by family. The title track used lyrics about my story, not naming me specifically, but capturing the universal experience of becoming so successful people couldn't ignore you anymore, yet feeling hollow because the approval you'd craved was no longer what you needed. It went platinum, spawned a movement, created space for thousands of people to share their own erasure stories. I went to the Grammys as his +1 and watched him win Album of the Year. In his acceptance speech, he thanked the woman who showed me that family is something you build, not something you're born into. The camera didn't pan to me, but I felt seen anyway. Marcus and Sophia threw a 1-year anniversary party for Vital Mind's acquisition, and this time I invited everyone, including, surprisingly, my parents. They came, awkwardly, overdressed for the casual backyard gathering, clearly uncomfortable in my chosen family's space. I watched my mother talk to Marisol, saw her face transform as she understood the impact of the foundation her daughter had built. I saw my father shake hands with Dr. Novak, heard him admit he'd been wrong about tech education's value. They left early, but before going, my mother pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you," she said, and for the first time in my life, I didn't need to hear it. "I know," I replied, and meant it. The hollow space inside me, the one carved by years of invisibility, had started filling with something more substantial than revenge or vindication. It filled with Marisol's acceptance letter, with Ethan's tentative text asking for coding help, with Sophia's friendship, with Ryan's music, with the knowledge that I'd turned my worst experience into something that protected others from similar pain. My success was no longer about proving them wrong. It was about building something meaningful in a world that desperately needed more chosen family and less conditional love. Dr. Novak had been right. Healing happened when I could think about my parents without rage or need. Now I could. They were just people who'd made terrible choices that inadvertently set me free. The bitterness had burned away, leaving behind someone stronger, more compassionate, more whole than the scared 22-year-old at that intervention dinner ever imagined becoming. I still kept the empty chair photo from the gala, not as a shrine to hurt, but as a reminder that absence speaks as loudly as presence. Those empty seats represented a choice my parents made to value their pride over their daughter. But they also represented the space where my chosen family appeared, filling the gaps with genuine love. The photo hung in my office now, alongside the scholarship recipients' graduation pictures, the Vital Mind team celebration shots, the candid moments with Sophia and Marcus and Ryan. A visual reminder that family is who shows up, who stays, who celebrates you not for conforming, but for becoming authentically yourself. On the anniversary of that intervention dinner, 8 years after they'd gathered 15 people to tell me I was making a mistake, I hosted my own dinner. Not to prove anything, but to celebrate the life I'd built from their rejection. 20 people came, scholarship recipients, Vital Mind team members, investors who'd become friends, Dr. Novak, Sophia, Marcus, Ryan, Priya. Even Ethan showed up with his girlfriend, nervous but present. My parents had been invited but didn't come, and for the first time, their absence didn't hurt. It was just information, a data point about their ongoing choices. We went around the table sharing what we were grateful for. Marisol talked about MIT, about her family finally accepting her path. Ethan talked about learning coding, about building something with his own hands for the first time. Sophia talked about the documentary opening conversations about family pressure globally. And when it came to me, I looked around at these people who'd chosen me as I'd chosen them and said, I'm grateful for the rejection that forced me to find you. I'm grateful for the hurt that taught me resilience. I'm grateful for every door that closed because it made me build my own house. The table erupted in agreement, glasses raised, chosen family celebrating the truth that sometimes the worst things that happen to you become the foundation for your best life. Later, alone in my penthouse, I opened my laptop and began writing, not for publication, just for myself. A letter to the 22-year-old Jordan who sat at that intervention dinner, devastated and alone. You're going to survive this, I wrote. You're going to build something extraordinary. You're going to hurt them as they hurt you, and you're going to regret that but also understand it was necessary. You're going to learn that revenge tastes like ashes, but justice tastes like freedom. You're going to become someone your parents can't comprehend, someone successful beyond their academic metrics, someone whole despite their rejection. And eventually, you're going to become someone who exists not as their failure or their triumph, but simply as herself. That's the best revenge. Becoming so completely yourself that their approval becomes irrelevant. The city lights twinkled below, each one representing a life being lived, a choice being made, a person becoming themselves despite or because of their circumstances. I thought about Marisol starting MIT next fall, about Ethan rebuilding his future brick by brick, about the hundreds of scholarship recipients whose paths I'd helped clear. I thought about my parents in their house, probably going through old photos, maybe finally understanding what they'd missed. And I thought about the woman I'd become, flawed, scarred, still learning how to love without needing reciprocation, but fundamentally whole in a way that rejection had accidentally enabled. The Jordan Sterling who sat at that intervention dinner 8 years ago would be astonished by this life. The penthouse, the wealth, the celebrity friends, the foundation, the impact. But she'd be more astonished by the peace, by the ability to think about her parents without rage consuming her, by chosen family that showed up consistently, messily, genuinely, by the understanding that some doors close not to punish you, but to redirect you toward better paths. My parents gave me many things: genetics, early childhood stability, a competitive drive that served me well. But the best gift they gave me was their rejection, because it forced me to become someone who didn't need their love to feel lovable, didn't need their approval to feel worthy, didn't need their presence to feel whole. I saved the letter to my younger self, knowing I'd probably never read it again, but needing to write it anyway. Then I opened my calendar and saw tomorrow's schedule. Breakfast meeting with a new scholarship recipient, afternoon coding session for Vital Mind's mental health expansion, evening at Sophia's for dinner with chosen family. A life built not in opposition to my parents' rejection, but in celebration of my own resilience. The hollow space had filled with something better than vindication or revenge. It had filled with purpose, with connection, with the hard-won knowledge that the best families are built, not born. And standing in my penthouse overlooking a city of possibilities, I finally understood what Dr. Novak had meant. I wasn't running anymore. I was just living, fully, authentically, wholly myself. The rest was just noise.